What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a few things that we need to discuss with you today. We have some pretty big development possible in parts of the main development region that could be impacting the Caribbean, the Lesser Antilles, the Bahamas, heck, even all the way up to the East Coast in the long run. So that's something we're going to be talking about a lot today. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about our little area of interest in the Gulf, and we'll briefly go ahead and talk about what's going on with that. And then we'll get into the main meat of the video, but because there is a flash flooding risk with this, I do want to briefly cover this since this is going to be impacting parts of Texas. So this is what we have right here from the National Hurricane Center. Basically, they've completely shrunk down their area of interest, and like I've said, this is probably not going to be developing at this current point. So let's go ahead and briefly read this, and then we'll get into the main meat of the video. A trough of low pressure located just off the coast of southwestern Louisiana continues to produce disorganized showers and thunderstorms. This system is moving westward and it has limited time to develop before it moves inland over southwestern Louisiana or Texas tonight. Regardless of formation, heavy rainfall will likely be over portions of the northwestern Gulf Coast during the next couple of days. 48 hours out, we have a 10% chance of development. Same thing in the next 7 days. So that's pretty much what we have going on. This will most likely be the last time we talk about this area of interest going forward. There's really not that much going on. It was fun while it lasted in the Gulf, but the main threat with that is going to be flash flooding. So if you are tuning in from Texas and Louisiana, you're going to want to pay attention to that tonight. Now, let's go ahead and get into the main meat of the video. So with that being said, pretty much what we have going on is we have a wave that's going to be coming off the coast of Africa in the next couple of days, and it's going to be moving into parts of the main development region, and then as it moves south of the Cabo Verde Islands and then starts to get its act together, this system actually has a pretty big chance of development. The models have been kind of screaming about this. The ensembles have been screaming about it. The operational runs are just starting to pick up on it a little bit. We're going to be dissecting everything that we've seen over the last day or so since I've put this video out, because we need to discuss all the possibilities. We need to discuss what's been going on and why I am heightening this up as a pretty big area of concern. And before I get into that, though, if you are in the Lesser Antilles and if you are in the Greater Antilles and quite frankly anywhere in the Caribbean, you should be on high alert with this system because this actually has pretty big model support, and let's go ahead and show you that right now. So starting off right here, what we have for you now is the 12Z ensemble runs from yesterday. And before I get started, I'm sure a lot of you are asking me right now, Patrick, man, why are you talking about the 12Z from yesterday? What about today's runs? We're going to get to those in a second, but we have to get up to a bit of a starting point right here because essentially what I'm paying attention to right here is consistency. Is this a consistent track? Is this a consistent pattern that we're noticing right here? Well, that's something we're going to want to pay attention to moving forward. But here's what we have with the 12Z. This is 10 days out. But I'm actually going to go ahead and go back to about 6 days just to kind of show you what's going on with this, and then we can dissect it forward. So this is now about 5 days or so at the time you're seeing this video. So about 5 days from now, we have pretty big model support, pretty big ensemble support southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Right here of a tropical wave starting to orient, starting to show signs of development right here. First of all, this is a lot of ensembles right here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like, it's hard for me to even count. There is at least from what I've been able to gather right here, there's at least 20 to 25 ensembles that the European is showing with this right here. Heck, maybe even more than that at this current point. It's hard to count, but as time continues to go on and as you start to go out, you start to see the system start to move more to the west towards the Lesser Antilles. This is now 6 days out at the time of you seeing this video, and then we're about 7 days out. The system starts to pick up speed, also starts to pick up a lot of power as well with a lot of these ensembles right here. And I will say this, the big organization, the big development doesn't really start right away. It takes a little bit of time for it to get its act together, but once it does, by the time it starts to, it's actually going to be approaching the Lesser Antilles and Greater Antilles in this run, and I've already taken a look at this, and I can go ahead and show you this. Going out to about 8 days out now, taking a look at this over here. So what you're seeing right here is you're noticing you have a lot of ensembles, pretty much with the European is forecasting right here. A lot. It's kind of depending on what's going to happen in the MDR, but you have pretty much a pretty decent spread of these runs going into the Gulf, going into not the Gulf, but going into the Caribbean, going into a few other areas as well towards Puerto Rico and the other Greater Antilles. But what you're noticing with this is how concentrated these ensembles are, especially in the Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico this far out. Now, granted, this is a little bit far out. This is 9 days out. But if you see ensemble runs this concentrated this early, you're going to want to pay attention to that very, very closely. Moving on to 9 days out now, showing you this, what we got right here. This is pretty interesting right here. What you're noticing right here is just, first of all, look at the amount of power a lot of these ensembles have. There's a 943 millibar system in here, and I can go ahead and zoom in and show you this right here. 943, 964, 975, 992, 997. There is quite a lot of power with these ensembles. Now, a lot of them also do have this around tropical storm strength and all of that, but if you see a concentrated signal like this and you see multiple ensembles with a lot of power, you're going to want to absolutely pay attention. And I will say, I've looked at the conditions. If it moves that far up to the north, they're actually going to be relatively favorable for this kind of development as well, and we'll show you that in a little bit. But looking at this right here, this is a signal that before we've been seeing kind of like weak signals and all of that stuff that didn't really pan out too much, particularly Invest 94L. But this is pretty concentrated. And for the rest of hurricane season, this is the kind of signal you're going to want to pay attention to right here. So now we zoomed out, and we're going to go ahead and show you the 0Z run for today right here. 0Z run doesn't have as much power to it, but you do notice a few subtle changes right here. First of all, the run is a bit shifted more to the south, heading more so into the Caribbean right here. I've looked at the runs right here. If it gets too far south and gets too deep into the Caribbean, it's going to be encountering a bunch of wind shear in that region as time goes on, so you're going to want to take that into consideration. But what I'm also noticing with this is this affects more land, particularly potentially parts of the Windward Islands now, still the Lesser Antilles, Windward Islands, Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands are a problem, but that puts also the Dominican Republic and Haiti in the line of fire as well with these ensembles, so that's something you're going to want to pay attention to going forward. But what I'm also noticing is you're starting to notice a little bit of a turn towards the north and potentially putting the Bahamas in the line of fire with this, so you're going to want to keep a very close eye on this. And I've seen some very long-range runs with this, and they're a bit more scattered than the 10-day forecast, but pretty much if you're in the United States and you're wondering, is this going to affect us? Right now, pay attention to the ensemble tracks and the model runs, but if you're anywhere from North Carolina to Florida, you're going to want to take this very seriously, and you're going to want to pay very close attention over the next few days, especially as we get more data and information, because this does look like our first big main development region threat that could impact a lot of people. And that is something you're going to want to pay attention to. Showing you the GFS real quickly, the GFS ensembles are having a hard time catching up to this right here. In fact, we have the 12Z pulled up. We have about 180 hours of it out. It's not nearly as strong as the European signal is with this, but I'm also noticing the operational GFS does have something there, and we'll show you that in just a second. But the operational and is kind of taking a look at this ensembles, and they're going, oh, okay, we got to pay attention to this very quickly. And looking at the 0Z, though, I will say this right here. We'll go ahead and go out to 10 days. The 0Z ensembles didn't show that much happening over here, but these ensembles are definitely starting to pick up in steam, especially with the 12Z. Like, first we got the 6Z with this right here. 6Z is definitely showing some more ensembles with this and more runs with this. The 12Z GFS, though, taking a quick gander at that, going out to 180 hours out, that's a pretty significant uptrend. But what I'm also noticing with this too is the European wants a more further to the north track, and the GFS wants a further south track into the Caribbean. And given the conditions, if it does end up following the GFS's track, it's going to probably peak in intensity in the Lesser Antilles and then start to get chipped apart by wind shear and then start to weaken as it approaches potentially areas in the northwestern Caribbean or Central America, but that's way out at this current point. So that's something you're going to want to take into account and something you're going to want to consider. And now showing you some operational runs, because the operational runs are starting to catch up and we can actually show you what potentially may be going on with this. So starting with this, we have the GFS pulled up. We have the 12Z GFS pulled up. I'm going to go ahead and show you why I have just to start off with this. We're going to go off and start off with a bang. So here's what we have for the GFS. Tropical wave comes off the coast of Africa in about 3 to 4 days or so. And then it starts to organize in about 5 or 6 days southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Then you're starting to notice some intensification start to take place. And at this current point, it gets up to a strong tropical storm, weak hurricane strength as well, as it crashes into Dominica, Guadalupe, some of those areas over there. Matter of fact, we can go ahead and zoom in on this just to kind of show you what's going on with this. Right here, it crashes north of Barbados, potentially makes landfall there, then heads towards Dominica, and then it enters the Caribbean. But at that point, it starts to get chipped apart by wind shear, and then it becomes an open wave as it approaches Central America. Granted, we're still way out to even consider a Central America or type of situation right here with the GFS, but I'm just showing you this because the operational runs are finally starting to catch up, and it's going to continue over the next couple of days, but we're going to want to pay attention to that moving forward. Next up, we're going to go ahead and zoom out and go to the European. We'll show you the European 0Z with this because the 12Z unfortunately isn't out yet, but the 0Z has pretty consistent low pressure system, pretty consistent organization taking place as it approaches the Lesser Antilles. Now, the European is still a bit uncertain in regards to what's going to be happening with the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and those areas right there, but the operational is starting to catch up to the ensembles we've seen so far, so that's something to pay attention to as well. And taking a look at the 12Z from yesterday, just to kind of hammer this a bit further, you saw all those big ensembles right there, but the operational is not really showing that much. Like I said in yesterday's video, and like I've said a couple of times today, the operational runs are going to take 2 to 3 days to catch up to the ensembles, so be patient with this. And before you start typing in the comments, "Oh, Patrick, man, you're hyping up ensembles," the ensembles are the first piece you need to look at. Then after that, the operational starts to catch up, and then you can dissect the information from that. So I just wanted to make that point very clear, but there's also some other runs I do want to go ahead and show you because we've seen a lot of stuff over the last 24 hours. We'll start with the European AI's run. The 18Z was pretty interesting to take a look at. I know I'm cherry picking here, but I just kind of want to show you what they were showing with this, but here's the situation. System starts to organize and develop, moves north of the Lesser Antilles, and then it starts to strengthen as it approaches the Bahamas, and then it starts to make landfall there. It actually takes an eerily similar path to Hurricane Andrew of 1992 as it approaches the Gulf. I know Weather Kingdom in his video last night was talking about this a little bit, but I will say, given that this is 300 hours out by the time we even consider this scenario, I'm not entirely dismissing it, but I am saying this is kind of improbable due to the lack of data we have at that current point. But the Europeans' AI model's also picking up on this, so showing the 0Z as well. 0Z is also showing a similar situation as well, albeit a little bit further to the south and a bit weaker as well, but then it starts to make a curve towards the north. So it's definitely picking up on that, but we'll have to pay attention to it. I know the Canadian and the Icon I've checked haven't exactly picked up on this just yet, but what I will tell you is, as you're starting to see more of these returns start to come in, this is something you're going to want to pay very close attention to. And not just that, and these aren't just models that I'm showing, I'm looking at the conditions as well. They're actually pretty favorable for this kind of development that the European ensembles, the European AI model, and the GFS are showing. And I'll go ahead and pull those up right about now. Let's go ahead and start with the obvious one. That's the sea surface temperatures. Water temps across much of the main development region where the system's allegedly going to be starting cracks 28 degrees Celsius. That's all I need to say to you, ladies and gentlemen. That's already primed enough for water development and more warming and all of that, because water temperatures over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 27-ish degrees Celsius for those who use the metric system, that's usually kind of the magic number. But there have been tropical cyclones and there have been hurricanes that have developed in cooler temperatures. Dawn of 2023, Hurricane Dawn was a good example of this. I actually want to go ahead and refresh the page to see if we can get an updated map with this. Yes, we can. Right here. But the reason I'm looking at this updated map is just to kind of see, okay, I'm looking at the MDR, but what's going to be like down the road? So you have the system kind of moving into 28 degrees Celsius waters all the way until you get to the Lesser Antilles, and then you start seeing warmer pockets of water, especially as you get towards the Bahamas, where you're cracking 29 and 30 degrees Celsius. And then if we even consider a Gulf scenario, you're looking at least 30 degrees Celsius in a lot of these regions over there. So that's something that you're going to want to pay attention to moving forward. So that's just your water temperature and the general gist. Ocean heat content is going to be something I'm really paying attention to as well. Now, the University of Miami's website is down, at least in terms of the North Atlantic. Their data isn't exactly bad or anything like that on their other basins, so that is some good news. It's just they're not getting the returns from the North Atlantic, so I kind of have to go back to basics and show what the show this map right here, which isn't the best for OHC, but you can get a rough idea of where the best conditions are. So in the main development region, you're looking at around 50 plus OHC as it heads towards the main through the main development region. But as it starts to approach the Lesser Antilles, when the strengthening starts to take place and the organization starts to turn up, you're looking at up to 100 OHC, which in my opinion would be perfect timing for really things to really start to turn up and really start to ramp up in terms of its organization and intensity. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. But then as it starts to split off, a northward shift would kind of keep it around 75-ish OHC, which is actually pretty good for strengthening, don't get me wrong. But if you take a further south route, you do have OHC values cracking 100, 125, up to 150 in a few areas, but you do run into a few other problems. Starting with the wind shear. Let's go ahead and pull this up. We'll show you the Europeans 0Z wind shear for this region as well. Let's start with that 200 to 850 millibar shear. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this. So what we have right here, across much of the MDR, starting about 5 days out, you do have some wind shear in the region right there, but that's not really, in my opinion, going to affect development, because some of this is the storm itself, and some of this is far to the north to really not do too much at that current point. And I do think these wind shear values are likely overestimated at this current point, given the ensembles that we're showing. But granted, we'll have to keep a very close eye on that. Now, if it does move into the Caribbean, it's going to be encountering this area of wind shear that could start to chip away and tear it apart. Now, if it encounters and moves up further to the north, it's going to be in better conditions right there. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. I'm kind of taking these wind shear values with a bit of a grain of salt, because it doesn't exactly, at least after the Lesser Antilles, it doesn't really add up to the kind of power that we're seeing with the ensembles. So we're going to want to pay attention to that, and you might want to look at real-time conditions moving forward. But lastly, there is one kind of thing I am paying attention to, is that is the dry air aspect of it. The dry air aspect of it is going to be very critical for how the system will ultimately develop, because there is still Sahara dust, there is still dry air in the MDR, but as you start to look at this, starting about 3 days out, you have a bit of a moisture pocket, a pretty big moisture pocket rather, that moves into the MDR, and what you're noticing with this is kind of the dry air and the Sahara dust to the north of the system can be mixed out. We're not even, like before we were seeing overwhelming amounts of this stuff, overwhelming amounts of dry air, overwhelming amounts of Sahara dust that could not really get mixed out by tropical cyclones. But if you have a pretty good outflow push, this kind of intensity, which isn't really that bad, you're looking at 35+% relative humidity at the mid to upper levels. That can be mixed out by a pretty good outflow boundary right there. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. And this moisture pocket remains relatively consolidated as it travels, and yes, there is going to be some dry air that starts to surround it, but again, this can be mixed out by some pretty good moisture and outflow and precipitation. It's going to kind of have to give its own energy, as Weather Kingdom once said. So that's kind of your parameters that you have right here. And if you're in the Lesser Antilles, you need to be paying very close attention to this. If you're in Puerto Rico, you need to be paying very close attention to this. If you're anywhere further to the west, you're going to want to wait and see, and we'll keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close it right here. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, join the Storms United Discord server. Link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.